10 myths about mental illness. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm your host Matt, and today I'm going to be talking to you about 10 myths about mental illness. Lego! Mental illness affects a substantial part of the world population, yet a lot of what we think we know of about mental illness and all of the various forms it can take is surrounded in stigma or myths, and today I'm going to be breaking down 10. Number 1. If I could edit, I would put a thing there. Number 1, that it's a sign of weakness. Now this one can't be furthest from the truth, and I feel like this is the most harmful, or one of the most harmful stereotypes or myths we're going to be talking about, because this one personally affected me and stopped me from trying to get help when I could have really used it. Mental illness is not a sign of weakness in any sense of the way. Often, our causes that our minds attributed to, depression, say eating disorders or something like that, can be caused by chemical imbalances in our brains or the environment around us rather than that. Now, outside factors like human interaction definitely could be helping the mental illness spread, but that's often not always the case. It is not a sign of weakness in any sense of the word. The weakness actually is in refusing to get help because, again, weakness is a negative thing that can be used against you. That is a weakness. It is not for help makes you stronger. Now, number 2, people with it are quote-unquote faking it to get attention. Again, a very harmful stereotype that rivals the first one in terms of dangerousness, because with this one, people don't try to help, or people who hear that might assume that they subconsciously might be trying to do that, and that can be very dangerous and prevent them from getting help, especially if, say, parents or somebody very important in the person's life is thinking this. That can prevent them from getting help, and that's dangerous. Along with the first 2 of these, it was not my fault that I'm depressed. I'm not weak for it, and I never faked it to get attention. Number 3 also goes along with these, that you can just snap out of it. Now, I had he's a beloved family member to me, always been kind to me, and when I mentioned my depression, he said, "You just gotta snap out of it." Now, he didn't mean that maliciously, but that stuck with me. And it's like, no, I can't just snap out of it. Some days it's easier to control my mood than others, but there's no such thing as just, I can't snap my fingers, that's the best you're going to get, of just snapping out of being mentally ill. That does not happen, and it can't. You can, quote-unquote, snap out of the mood-ish, if it's a good day. Number 4, that it's not a real medical problem. Sorry, I have notes down on the computer in front of me. This is not true. A lot of people don't realize, but mental and physical health are actually linked together, and if one suffers, the other can tend to suffer as well. Mental illnesses such as depression, eating disorder, maybe bipolar disorder, often report feeling physically sick because of their symptoms. The 2 types of healths are actually one and the same, just 2 sides of the same coin, or Thanos coaster. Mental, physical, it's still the same thing, it's just 2 sides of it, linked to the same person's health. Again, mental illness can actually physically take lives. It's done it countless times before. I think that qualifies as a real medical problem. Number 5, that there's a certain type of person that has mental illness. I've seen this before. Somebody thinks they've met one person with that disorder, like, say, especially in my case, autism. And it's like, oh, you've met one autistic person, and autism, even more so mental illness, is such a broad spectrum. Even if it's the same thing like depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, anorexia, you've met one person with that condition, you've met just one person with that condition. a person with autism might have more in common with, say, a neurotypical, that's somebody without autism, than they would another autistic. I've had that be the case with me, and it was not really surprising. We're all people, and we tend to forget that. Number 6. This is a stereotype us with the mental illness often lie to ourselves and say it's permanent. And that is not the case for a lot of things. Like me myself, I will admit I've struggled with long-term depression for as long as I can remember. At least since 7th grade began, and I'm going into my sophomore year of college soon. But I will admit it can be long-term, but permanent, no. A lot of people have recovered from all kinds of mental disorders. Eating disorders, depression, bipolar disorder. Although with some of those, you don't fully recover. Hate to be the bearer of bad news in this one, but you can just reduce the symptoms. Substantially, though, a lot of people don't even notice, which that is a plus. Depression, mental illness, blah, 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 blah. Unless it's like my autism, where it's permanently part of my brain, or not permanent. I don't really even consider the autism a disorder at this point. I just consider it part of me that I would never get rid of anyway. Number 7. People with mental illness are violent. This has been statistically proven wrong. Actually, even more than wrong, quite the opposite of this. People with mental illness are more likely to be the victim of a violent crime, statistically speaking, simply because of a few bad apples that have clogged up the news system. See my Reasons to Smile video for happy news. Just saying, shout out to myself. But just because of a few bad apples have supposedly, because it was mental illness rather than hatred. There's a big difference between mental illness and hatred, and a lot of people don't seem to realize that. With the recent tragic happenings down south, where people were shot because they were a different race or some kind of supremacy thing, I don't consider that mental illness. I consider that just hatred. Number 9. Can we do a retake? No? Okay. Number 8. People with mental illness are not smart. Again, quite the opposite, actually. A lot of history's greatest geniuses have been speculated to, or have been actually proven to have mental illness. I think it was, Albert Einstein. I'm not going to quote exact word for word because I don't have a photographic memory, but one of the things he mentioned was that being smart is one of the most miserable and lonely things a person could have. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. Albert Einstein was said to be autistic. Isaac Newton was supposedly autistic. Thomas Jefferson, supposedly Mozart. And a lot of very smart people tend to suffer from things like depression because they feel isolated from the world socially. I myself am no exception. I feel completely isolated because of my mind. 9. Higher functioning individuals can't have mental illness because they're able to function in day-to-day life. Furthest from the truth. I have a job, I go to school, I can hold down an everyday life. It's just, this is an internal rather than an outside world functioning type of problem. I can function just fine. I'm a smart guy. I can do really well with grades. Outside functioning is not the issue. Now, it's true mental illness can affect a person to a point where they can't function day-to-day life-wise. But that's not always the case. And people, just because they're higher functioning, I stole this term from the autism thing, just because they're higher functioning does not mean that they don't need help or anything like that. It's all different for everyone. Now this one's more suggestive than anything, and it's been implied in a lot of things, that we aren't human. Unfortunately, I've tended to notice through histories and even current treatment of mental illness that they're treated, not really, say me, but some people have been treated subhuman, like the old-timey mental asylums, sometimes families, again, not mine, but I have noticed this, sometimes families have treated their child with mental illness as subhuman and locked them away, sent them away, what have you. Now again, it's different for everybody, and people need to realize this. Literally every person's story with mental illness, there's always variables involved. And for some people with mental illness, like severe autism, or say, I can't remember the last one, but up until recently, insurance companies were legally allowed to deny organ transplants to people with severe mental illness. Until recently, thankfully, they were able to fight and get that repealed. But yeah, these stereotypes and myths affect a large percentage of us, and often is the biggest thing standing in between us and getting help. I learned that lesson the hard way, listening to these things for years and years when I could have been saving myself from all this. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.